folks, welcome to another Watertrek 360. Today I'm down here in St. Croix. That is the famous Frederiksted Pier. That is Butler Bay. I'll be checking out my new iPhone 14 Pro as well as hopefully doing some wreck dives. Let's go have some fun. I was excited about the iPhone 14 Pro and specifically some of its new features like action mode and the increased main camera pixel size. I tried to test this a month or so ago, but Hurricane Nicole changed those plans. All the videos shown are shot with the iPhone 14 Pro, with the exception of one comparison clip using a GoPro. So here's my take on the 14 Pro while shooting in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands. Stay with me, there's a lot of great footage. You might be surprised with some of my findings. Most aspects of the iPhone 14 Pro are the same as the 13 Pro, so I'm only going to cover the differences, not things like facial recognition or dynamic island, unless it pertains to underwater photography. Body size. It's only a millimeter or so bigger than the 13 Pro. The major exception is the camera bump out. The overall thickness is now 12.03 millimeter, whereas with the iPhone 13 Pro, the total depth was 11.25 millimeter. Battery capacity. The iPhone 14 Pro went up from 3,095 milliamp hours to 3,200 milliamp hours. This was to help extend battery life due to new internal processing needs, especially with the always-on display feature. Screen brightness. This also went up from 1024 to 1448 nits over the iPhone 13 Pro. A nit is simply a measurement of the light per square meter in terms of candle power. This should help in shallow water where the sun is at your back. The 14 Pro also has a slightly wider and more accurate color gamut per the specs, which should aid in color quality. The display resolution also went up from 2532 by 1140 to 2556 by 1179, roughly a 1.7 increase. And you should notice sharper image viewing. So let's talk the real reasons I upgraded. The lens differences. The heavily touted difference is the 48 megapixel main camera versus 12 megapixel on the 13 Pro. That's a pretty significant jump. Also, the 14 Pro's primary camera is 24 millimeter versus 26 millimeter, which gives a little wider shot. Both still have a 22 millimeter focal length. While the 13 Pro has a wider maximum aperture of f1.5 on the main camera versus the f1.78 on the iPhone 14 Pro, and is theoretically therefore capable of producing brighter images, the 14 Pro now uses a BSI sensor, or backside illuminated sensor, which increases the light gathering efficiency of the sensor to deliver higher sensitivity, less noise, and supposedly better all-around image quality for photos. The 14 Pro also has a standard setting now for 2x zoom, leveraging the core portion of the primary lens, giving 12 megapixels. It's not 48, but still better than the digital zoom of the 13 Pro. The ultra-wide lens still offers a 13 millimeter equivalent focal length. The iPhone 14 Pro, however, is set at f2.2 versus the iPhone 13, which is f1.8. Per Apple, this was to leverage the photonic engine and help get sharper photos in less than ideal situations. The telephoto lens for both models starts with a base 3x and is a 72 millimeter equivalent, and both have an aperture of f2.8. The difference here again is the quality lift from the photonic engine. The selfie lens for both models is a true depth 12 megapixel camera. The iPhone 14 Pro, however, has an f1.9 aperture compared with the f2.2 on the 13 Pro, which provides brighter images along with an autofocus capability. For photographers, the iPhone 14 Pro can store ProRAW files as uncompressed 48 megapixels, meaning they will be huge from a storage standpoint, but contain tons of image data to manipulate. If you want ultimate control over your images in post-production, shoot RAW. In photo, you also have a night mode. This allows for longer shutter length in dark conditions. I didn't use it since underwater I don't feel I'm ever stable enough to deal with the longer shutter length, and I use a strobe. From a video standpoint, the biggest change is that the 14 Pro now offers an action mode within the standard video setting, basically a stabilization mode to compete with GoPro. In addition, the cinematic mode can now shoot 4K at 24 or 30 FPS. We'll get to some of these differences again later. Full disclosure, I did not use pano, I don't have much use for it, or time-lapse. For time-lapse, unless the camera is stationary, set on a tripod, videoing a really slow-moving object like a sea cucumber, to me it's not worth it. I also did not do a quick video, since that will always show up as 1080p at 30 FPS. So the good. Since body size was similar to the iPhone 13 Pro, I didn't really have to make any changes to my rig configurations. They worked well. While I did get a new sleeve for the 14 Pro for my Divevolk Seatouch 4 housing, the 13 Pro sleeve fit it as well. While I've stated many times I am not much of a still photographer, the differences with the 14 Pro were readily apparent to me. The 48 megapixels clearly made a difference. I chose to shoot RAW and spent a lot more time trying to do still shots than I have previously. The 2x setting also helped with sharpness. Unfortunately, I didn't bring a wide angle or macro lens on this short trip, but I will try those out next time. If you've seen any of my other videos, these photos are much better than some of my previous. Believe me, it's not me, it's the camera. While doing standard video with the main camera at 1x, it did provide a little more viewing area, which helps not having to go to ultra wide. The zoom seemed better to me than the 13 Pro. In this shot, while using SLO-MO, I zoomed up to the max of 9x. Remember though, you will get increased graininess and wobble, as you see with these garden eels I took in a standard video mode. The ultra-wide for me had less focusing issues and produced brighter video than the main 1x camera in most cases. You have to remember that there will be distortion at the outer edges when using ultra-wide. If you don't like that, you can always crop the image later. In shallow water, it did seem like there was an improved color for me versus the 13 Pro. I still use lights even in shallow water. The sweet spot for best color was between 20 and 40 feet. You'll still need a red filter, as you see here with the differences in color with the spiny lobster. I had plenty of storage with the 512 gigabyte, but if you shoot RAW and longer videos, then I would suggest getting 1 terabyte and upping your cloud storage. I like that I can edit my photo in camera and quickly upload to social media from the boat if I want. I find that cumbersome with other cameras since I have to use my phone anyway to connect to the device. The Divevolk Seatouch housing I used had quick access to the phone, so I was able to catch this rainbow before it disappeared. So the bad. Action mode can only record up to 2.8K at 60 frames per second. It does support HDR with Dolby Vision. It also makes a sizable crop to the video due to the stabilization AI. The one major downside I found with action mode is that it requires a lot more light to work properly. The reason is because the 14 Pro's relatively small 2.55 of an inch wide-angle sensor. This happened even in relatively shallow water when there were clouds. I got the message more light required, even when using lights. Bottom line, this mode was made to compete with GoPro as an action camera. So I tried moving the camera really fast to simulate more bounce. I have seen reports of image corruption where action mode videos look over-pixelated. I didn't get that, but I didn't like the overall look. For me, you do things slowly underwater, not fast. So with the loss of image quality at 2.8K, makes this a mode I will not likely use underwater. Battery life. I used my iPhone 13 Pro on hundreds of pool tests in at least 50 open water dives, testing multiple housings last year. Only when the housing required an app or Bluetooth did I see such heavy battery drain. My iPhone 14 tests, I use a Divevolk Seatouch 4 Max underwater housing, which requires no app or Bluetooth. My battery consumption was terrible compared to the 13 Pro. I dove in Cayman Brack using the 13 3-4 dives a day with the same housing, and I didn't see this kind of battery drain. I've seen lab tests indicating a 17% drop compared to the 13 Pro. I'm not sure if it's due to the always-on display, but it was noticeable. The middle chart shows where I shut the camera off between dives on my second day. Notice the difference. Something to keep in mind if you're doing diving on a liveaboard. I chose to shut off always on display as well as wallpaper notification, at least while I was diving. And as usual, don't forget to put it in airplane mode. If you're going to shoot raw, be aware that the file sizes are huge. On average, I got 70 to 80 meg per image. Since the camera bump out is bigger, you may have issues with your underwater housings that you currently have. I have 2 housings that I use with the 13 Pro I can no longer use with the 14 Pro. Check out my video. I reviewed 20 underwater housings for the smartphone. I will leave a link in the description. Even though the ultra-wide gave me less focusing issues, depending on light and depth, I did get some washout. You can see in the white diver's fins on the right, there's almost a halo effect around them. And now the ugly. Cinematic mode. I used to be able to download cinematic videos directly to my computer and manipulate them on my Mac. I followed normal procedure, downloaded them via AirDrop, making sure you have all photos data on. Once in FCPX, I used the HDR Tools effect and converted to HLG 709 SDR. This no longer works unless you upgrade your machine to the new Ventura 13.1. This is an issue on older machines if you can't upgrade to the newer iOS. Here's the workaround if you want to alter the focal point. You have to do it on your phone. Go into the camera app, make sure that the video has been processed as cinematic. You can check in Photos app. Edit the app. In the upper left, you can see the f-stop. Touch that and you'll see a slider on the bottom allowing you to change focal length. Select the range you want. The caveat here is that it changes it for the entire length of the video, not one point in time. You can AirDrop as usual, but do not select all photos data on. If you do, it'll show up as a cinematic video with the base settings anyway. You'll know that it's true cinematic by the metadata. If the file shows dish timed metadata, then it is a true cinematic with the base f2.8. The following 4 videos show f-stop 2.8, 6.3, f9, and f16 changes made on the phone and exported. You can see the varied sharpness of the diver in the background. This normalizes once the lens focuses on the diver, not the reef. Remember, there is no cinematic function in Photos on iCloud. If you remove your cinematic photos from your phone and then try to put them back later to edit them, all your coded data is gone and they are simply flat videos. Now the big ugly, focusing issues. While there were some focusing issues with the iPhone 13 Pro when moving from a close-up to a distant shot, it was nothing like the 14 Pro. It happened while using every video mode. It was very disappointing, especially when I had shots I really wanted, like this reef shark. The little box insert shows the same video on my accompanying GoPro. It seemed to happen mostly right after I switched modes or zoom length, but it happened a lot. Roughly 20% of my video on the first day was blurry. Turns out there are documented focusing issues with the 14s. Some say it will get fixed with the new release. I was on 16.1.1 and I didn't want to upgrade my phone while away to 16.2 just in case there were issues. The iPhone 14's camera focus problems occur when auto macro option is disabled. Apparently the 14 has a bigger minimal focus distance due to the increased size of the camera sensor, which is 1 at 1.3 versus 1 at 1.7, and combined with the new optical formula AI being used, creates the issue. I turned faster shooting, lens correction, and auto macro on prior to diving my second and third days. This is counter to what I've used and suggested before. Just as important, go to preserve settings and make sure macro control is also on. While it was better, it still happened, especially with the main camera, and to a lesser degree with the ultra-wide .5x. This may be to me still needing to do the upgrade to 16.2. I had focusing issues with the 13 Pro as well if there was a lot of particulate matter in the water and it was murky, but not as bad as with the iPhone 14. I also tried tapping the object on the viewing screen to set the focus point. This worked a couple of times, but underwater things change quickly, so it was of limited help. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that a 16.2 upgrade addresses this. Not sure what other AI bugs with the new photonic engine and interactions with the BSI sensors still exist, but we'll see. So that was my take on the iPhone 14 Pro. I hope you found this segment useful. When it worked, it was great. I liked the video. Color was great, the image is sharp. You saw those in some of the videos. The focusing issue was a major disappointment and extremely frustrating. I am hoping that Apple can fix this pretty quickly. I still think these cameras are going to evolve and only get better. So, at this point, would I recommend getting an iPhone 14 Pro? No, not unless you want to go through some of the challenges that I did. The 13 Pro has great camera quality, and if you have one, I suggest you keep it. The 48 megapixel, which intrigued me, is really only for photo mode, not video, so for me it's a wash, since both cameras have a video resolution of 3840 by 2160. Let Apple figure out all its bugs before you plunk down money on a 14 Pro. The 15 Pro is coming out later this year with even more changes, with rumors around a periscope telephoto lens. To me, the 14 Pro was a transitional phase with those bigger changes, as I mentioned, coming out at the end of this year. With a steep price tag for the Pro and the Pro Max, it's really up to you and your current needs as to whether or not you want to go ahead with that upgrade. Additionally, if you have an underwater housing already that uses an app, I have no idea what results you're going to get from a battery usage, focusing capability, quality of image, etc. I do plan on doing those tests at a later date for housings that actually fit the 14 Pro. Check out some of my recent product videos, especially around housings for the 13 Pro. I have a couple rec videos I'm working on. Check out my other channel, Tech 360 Videoland, with videos leveraging 360 cameras. I hope you are enjoying your diving experiences. And as always, until the next time, go explore, get wet.